So in the last video, we went ahead and we got our background object set up so that it loads in. Whoops. And well, so far tiles the background. So we got that set up. But after getting the step to work, I always like to pause and think it through. So just take a few minutes and think over it and wonder if there's anything that could be cleaned up on it to avoid having to do so much of that later. And I think there is. I also wanted to show something real quick here. There's the empty SVG. If I open that real quick, which might take a second to open, so I'm going to pause the video. This is all that is. It's an SVG, 16 by 16 pixel SVG file with nothing in it. That way, when we do control objects and stuff, we don't have to create a separate object for them, and they won't crash for not having an image. They'll just have an empty image we can work with. But as far as cleaning this up, I think there are a couple things. One thing, well, actually, two little mistakes. I meant to put this in the loop. In this case, I don't think it would hurt. It's probably better up here. So we, because our background doesn't change. So it's probably okay there. But passing these numbers in, that's something we can get right from here. Because once we run this method, that returns a surface for us to use. So game is a surface, and we already saw how to get the width and height of a surface up here in Stuff 2D. Where's our setters? Or, well, I guess in the initializer. The width is the, for some surface, we have a get underscore width and get underscore height. So we should probably use those. And what I just forgot earlier, the set sprite should do the same thing as the initialization. It's easiest if we pass in an array of strings, which are file names as strings, and then load them in to Pygame surfaces afterwards. So our setter should have been this. I'm just going to copy and paste it. Undo. Something seemed weird there. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to copy and paste that in. So it does the same thing. I just plain forgot that one earlier. But on our lay tiles, we don't really need to pass in the scene width and height because we can get that right from our game object, which is something that'll make this a lot cleaner later. So instead of scene width, we'll do game, which is a Pygame surface dot get underscore width, and same thing for height. Game dot get underscore width, which will also make it a lot easier to remember because then whenever we call it, where to call it at, all we have to do is say where we're going to, what surface we're going to lay our tiles on. And the replacement for that worked, so we can get rid of that. Replacement for that worked, so we can get rid of that. And the replacement for that worked, so we can get rid of that. And now, at least the background has been updated to this nice encapsulated object that contains everything we need and is ready to be built on when we discover more needs building games. Now we can do the same thing with the player, or at least get a start on it. Though it would probably be a good idea to do a quick test run on what we just changed. Yep, looks like it still loads. So everything's still working like it did before. So we have our loading the image in. That's in the parent object we inherited from. We'll get to the bounds method before too long. It's marked out in there. We just haven't done anything with it yet. Player X, player Y, and is walking will, those are encapsulated in our object. And all of this stuff should be encapsulated in our object. And player control, well, that's the move method we're getting ready to add to our player. That's kind of the starting point we need to work with. And so all of this we're getting ready to replace with a nice encapsulated object. So we come over to objects, next thing, all of this should be good. Just call the parent, set to the initial setup, the default values, a couple getters and setters, and then our move method. So we can take this out, and what the move method needs to do is the same thing we did over here. Check our key press and move accordingly. So I'm going to come over here to in our main loop, in our event listeners. If our event is a key down, well, that's where we're moving. So I'm going to take and hit Control X for that, and I'm going to replace it with player.move and pass in that event. So now we need to go write this method. So over in game objects, we have this move method, takes in a self and an event. So we passed in an event. So then we can just check if the key on that event is one of these things. Oh, can get that to the right indenting level. I'll do the is walking as true. I'm just going to comment that out for now because I know we're going to do that eventually. But right now, just one thing at a time. That way it doesn't overwhelm us, and fix that in it. So instead of the player control method, we can just put it right here though. So I'm going to take all of these out. And we have everything about this player built in. We have our XY coordinates inherited from a parent. We have the image. We'll do the animations in a moment. We have the speed it's moving at. We'll pass one in. And then we have something for animation, other stuff for animations. But for the move, we have the speed and the X and the Y. So instead of calling something else and doing that, we'll just do this. We have our speed, and then we can just move in the speed move the speed in the appropriate direction. So if we come over here to the move method, so if the A button is pressed, we just want to reset the X attribute. So self.setX, because we inherited that from the parent, so we know we have that. And what we want to do is, from our current one, self.get our current X, and A is the negative direction, so we'll subtract self.get speed. So wherever the new X position, we're going to set the X position to wherever we're at, minus the speed variable, and then it will be rendered before a couple steps after checking for movements. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it in here, and S, well, that's down, so that means that'll be a Y. We'll adjust the Y by getting the current Y, and down is the positive Y direction, so we'll add the speed to that. Then D moves to the right, so we're going to change the X value by getting the current X. Whoops, there should be parentheses there. That is a method. We'll change the X by getting the current X, and to the right is the positive X direction, so we'll add the speed. And same thing here. W is up, so that's a Y. So we're going to change Y, and we do need parentheses because get Y is a method. And up is negative Y is up, so we want to subtract the speed to do that. That should be all we need for the player. So if we come back over here and try to bring in an instance of it and give it a check. So after the ground, we'll create a player object is a character 2D, and we need to pass in a sprite for it, which is this sprite. Control copy. sprite equals Control V to paste that array, and maybe an X and Y starting position. So X equals 1, 2, 3, Y equals 2, 3, 4. Just gives us some random starting position. That's probably the same one I used earlier. And everything should be encapsulated. So everything about the player gets commented out. And down here, instead of calling that method, we will just have our player dot render method at our where we're currently at. So that'll be player dot get x, then player dot get y, and that should put him on the screen. So let's give this a run. The same logic we had before, we just moved it into the player to encapsulate the WASD keys there where they need to be. Called in the same sprite. Whoops, that's a problem. Those should be over here. There we go. Set up some X and Y positions to start at. Gave it a sprite. It'll calculate the width and height and everything. Use default values. And then whenever there's a key press, we'll pass that event into our move method, and then we'll check to see which key it is and move it appropriately there. And then after all the events, we'll re-render our player at wherever our X and Y position is. So let's give this a try. Check for typos, because I was once again talking. Render missing one required positional argument Y. So what did render have in it? If we go over to the render method, render needs the game object. That's right. Didn't even have to go that far. We have to say where we're going to blit it, and then our X and Y. Didn't even have to get as far as looking at it. So it came up. I'm pushing D, but nothing's happening. So let me look and see if I can figure out why that's not moving. And I'll be right back. Okay, so it did not take very many echoes to figure out what went wrong. Immediately the key press and moving echo worked to say the key had been pressed. Then so that was in the events. That was when it first entered the method, before moving and after moving. So the problem is it's not moving, and I think I forgot to set speed. X, Y, yep, we need a speed here. So over here, speed equals, what was it originally? 3. So speed should be 3. Well, let's give that another try. So that worked. Except it should probably be clearing that image off at some point. So let me check and see why that's not happening. Oh, I had to think for a minute about this one, but I think I realized what happened. I was thinking this would be okay, but I was thinking about different game engines. In Pygame, everything is a surface, and we just transfer, we put together this surface, and Blit transfers another surface onto that. So we're actually constantly changing what that one is, which means we need to redo it every time. In Pygame, we do have to redo it every time. So let's see if that worked. There we go. So we don't change the image and then keep the altered version. We're back to the original. So it looks like that worked. I guess in the next video, we'll put the animation stuff back on our character, and I will see you then.